Hello and welcome to Around the Nest, J-Talk on our way around the Toronto Blue Jays minor league organization. I'm Jesse Goldberg-Strassler with the Lansing Lugnuts, and over the course of this week's show, we'll be checking in with Short Season A Vancouver. We'll also be going down to the Appalachian League, Advanced Rookie Ball Bluefield, and checking in there. Vancouver's voice, Rob Fai. Meanwhile, the voice of the Bluefield Blue Jays, Danny Noakes. We'll be going up the ladder as well. Over in Advanced A, the voice of the Dunedin Blue Jays is Marshall Kelner. In AA, Bob Lipman will join the show, and we'll talk about the New Hampshire Fisher Cats. And in AAA, the voice of the Buffalo Bisons, Ben Wagner. But we begin this week. We go immediately to Rob Fai, the voice of the Vancouver Canadians. And Rob, let's talk about this. Let's start with your C's. Let's talk about first, what was your baseball highlight of the week?
Well, considering, Jesse, that we came off a 9-game losing streak, I would say that our first victory in 10 games probably did it. It was a 5-4 victory in Everett, and what made it cool, Jesse, is this is a team we weren't supposed to beat. They had the best record in the Northwest League. Everett, of course, a minor league affiliate of the Seattle Mariners, is locked and loaded. They're older, they're more veteran, they look real sharp. But the Canadians just all of a sudden said enough is enough. So coming off an off day, the first one in 26 games, for the Vancouver Canadians to finally get off the schneid, get a victory, that for me easily the highlight of the week.
Are there teams in the Northwest League whom season to season they fall into a certain identity, whether there's a team that they're generally older or another team that they're generally younger and much more raw?
Well, absolutely. And actually the team that we're wrapping up with today, the Everett Aquasox, fits that profile. They're a very good first half team. They sent a lot of their top round draft picks. Last year's first rounder, Alex Jackson, is in the outfield again for the third straight game tonight for the Aquasox. And also the proximity between Safeco Field, home of the Mariners, and Everett, which is about 45 minutes separating the two stadiums. Every once in a while, you'll get a Felix Hernandez on a rehab assignment, or you'll get somebody that all of a sudden you look at your scorecard and you say, wow, this is kind of cool, but at the same time, they're probably going to feed it to us. So they're always a team like that. In Vancouver, of course, there are 3 championships in 11, 12, and 13. We always won the second half. So we sit here 7 games out of first with just over a week to play in the first half of the season, and nobody seems to be sweating it as far as the manager goes or the coaching staff. They're like, it's just another day at the ballpark. We'll get him in the second half.
Let me ask you about some of your players who you've received from Bluefield. For example, how has Andrew Guillotte impressed you so far?
Well, I'll tell you what, Andrew Guillotte, of all the players that have come up from Bluefield, is probably the most entertaining and the most engaging from a fan perspective. I mean, Guillotte right now in 6 games hitting .375 with a home run and 3 RBIs. But more than anything, and I know it doesn't show up in a box score very often, Jesse, but what he has done defensively has eerily similarities to another Canadians outfielder that I really enjoyed watching, and Chaz Frank, who I know that you guys had for a little bit. And, I just look at guys from that region, from Louisiana, from North Carolina. They're gamers. They're dirt dogs. They're the guys that are willing to go into the corners and rough it up, to use a hockey analogy. And I've loved enjoying him. And I know he's not your prototypical 6'3", 220 Mike Trout type, but at 5'8", 175, he is just as entertaining. And I'll tell you what, Roman Fields last year was a tough act to follow, but Andrew's off to a good start.
Well, that reminds me of another player, not the tallest guy in the world, now playing for the Lugnuts, Chris Carlson, who could hit,
yes,
who could get on base, who could help you out defensively in all sorts of different ways. These kind of guys, they've seen success in the Blue Jays organization.
Well, what's funny is I've been going back and forth this year. I'm on the Blue Jays bandwagon. I'm off the Blue Jays bandwagon from a scouting perspective. I do think, and again, I understand that this is all a part of the Blue Jays conversation. Scouting department for me for the last couple of years has had a tough couple of seasons. And it's not just about not going out and being able to get Ryan Beatty or Tyler Bickford or, whoever. It's more, can you find a guy that is going to profile as a major leaguer? And right now, I look at this Vancouver Canadians team. I don't see a major leaguer, but I do see ball players. And the question that I have, and I go back and forth on, whether I'm on the fence or off the fence, is there a method to the madness with the Toronto Blue Jays? Because, again, you look at this outfield right now for the Vancouver Canadians. You got Sean Hurley in right. I don't know if he projects. Andrew Guillotte in center. I don't know if you're going to take a 5-foot outfielder or 5'8" outfielder to the major leagues. I mean, it's a unique time for the Blue Jays organization, and I feel really weird saying that considering the last 4 years we've been to the championship, but I'm still trying to put my finger from a scouting department on what they're trying to achieve here, because when I look at our roster, for example, I don't see anybody that profiles as a major leaguer.
Let me ask you about some of the players drafted this past June. And we just touched on Andrew Guillotte, but Carl Wise, out of the College of Charleston, and you also have his college teammate Gunnar Height. What does Carl bring to the table?
Well, Carl's a guy that looks still like a college kid. He swings with a bit of an upward trajectory, which means he's still used to the aluminum, still getting used to the wood. He's a guy that right now is still trying to get a feel. And again, it's really tough to go after a guy that's only played a handful of games. I mean, he's played 21 minor league games. 7 in the Appalachian League, a handful of games with us here in Vancouver. The one thing that concerns me right now is there enough time here in the rest of the season to get Carl Wise, as they say, quote, right? And, I look at him, he's got raw talent, out of the College of Charleston, a school that Gunner went to. But for my money right now, it kind of plays like a slow bat. He's a base hit guy, nothing with a lot of power. He's coming off a pretty good game with the Vancouver Canadians, so hopefully there's a bigger sample size that we can draw from. But early on, not much to him, to be honest.
I think that's an interesting question about what can Vancouver accomplish in the time left in the season. What do you think that they can? How would you answer that?
Well, I think right now what you do is you wash your hands of the first half of the season. Of course, we stumbled through a 9-game losing streak. Morale was low, but the one thing that you look at from this Canadians organization is, again, it is a very big second half team. You get into the dog days of summer, but then all of a sudden you go to Nat Bailey Stadium and it's sold out every night. I think that the Canadians over the years have gotten their second wind right about now. So it's one of those things where I think the first 3 weeks of the season, all of a sudden you go from these colleges. Some of these schools don't have a large fan base. And all of a sudden you go into Vancouver, and I tell you what, Jesse, it's 6,000 announced, but it sounds like it's 12 or 13. It's a really unique environment in Vancouver where they're loud, they're right on top of you. And I think it takes 2 or 3 weeks for these players to acclimatize to that kind of environment, which is why I think we're such a good second half team. What can we accomplish in 38 games? That's up to Dave Pano, Jim Sykowski, and the manager, John Schneider. But what I see right now is this team finally starting to find an identity. People are starting just now to find what their roles are. And guys like Connor Panis out of Toronto, who's a first baseman / left fielder, Justin Atkinson returning from the Lansing Lugnuts. He's caught a couple of games here and also played very good at first base. I think now we're starting to get the pieces, and you just got to wash your hands of the first half and hopefully in the last calendar month build some more character.
Hey, if you could choose one or the other, either playing great early on and then lowering yourself as the season went on, or now the way that you guys have been, where it was such a struggle at the start of the year, and now perhaps finding your form, perhaps in the very last couple of weeks of July, these players stepping up, making those improvements. I like the way, yes, acclimatized, exactly. And then August could very well get interesting. Justin Atkinson going down to Vancouver, and we can go back to, I beg your pardon for interrupting you. He didn't catch too much with Lansing. We used him at third base. We used him across the diamond, but he was just trying to get healthy. And so I was pleased to see how well he was fitting in.
Well, you got to remember the X factor is Justin's from Vancouver. So he gets a little bit of home cooking. He gets to sleep in his parents' bed instead of a housing family or a hotel. There's those little variables that I think play well for Justin Atkinson. When I heard that he was returning to Vancouver, my eyebrows raised a little bit, and I thought, oh boy, is this where you want to send a guy that's been scuffling? Because, again, the expectation of Justin as the hometown hero, of course, magnified in Vancouver. But to his credit, he's gotten here. And I found that Justin's actually matured from the last time that he's with the Canadians because, Justin, the last time, I think it was almost like a deer in a headlight situation where he did get 50, 60, 70 ticket requests a game, and it was just overwhelming for him. This time around, a little more seasoned. He's been through it a couple more times, and he's over at first base. Catching, he's been decent. Over at first base, he's been outstanding, and I would hope that he's our everyday first baseman the rest of the way.
Solid guy to have on the field and in the clubhouse. Who else has stepped up and is taking that leadership role?
Well, I think of guys like Andrew Case. Andrew's one of those guys that hasn't pitched much in the closer role. You only get him for a couple of innings, but here's a Canadian guy with a laid-back attitude. But at the same time, during our 9-game streak, you really got to see some of the personality of these players within the Canadians organization. Some guys would kind of, drag their feet around and head down because they weren't hitting well. There were a couple of guys whose averages were right around 100, and you could tell that they were really struggling mentally as well as physically. But then there's guys that have been through this before, and they understand the process. And again, I go back to Andrew Case as a guy, John Wandling, who, of course, is in here in Vancouver, Ryan Borecki, names that, of course, everybody within the nest are starting to identify as potential prospects. And, I look at the character of a team, not just when you're winning games, but what are you doing through those skids, and especially a franchise record 9-game losing streak. And you're not looking for rah-rah guys. You're looking for guys that are going to look at the other players in the eyes that are scuffling and really dragging their feet and bringing the morale down, saying, hey, this is a long process, man. You think this season's long? Wait till next year when you're playing 140 games. So to me, those were the guys that stepped up. That's the character that I was looking for, and I think that's why we're finally starting to turn the corner.
It's fun to start with talent and then to move our way down and speak about character. And this does bring me to Ryan Borucki, who has been there before, but he was sidelined due to injury, and now trying to get himself back right. You've seen him now 2 appearances. How is his road coming?
I tell you what, if you were to ask me who would follow the likes of a guy like Justin Nicolino, I would put my money all in on Ryan Borucki. I guarantee you there's better talent in the Blue Jays organization, but what made Justin Nicolino so good, and I know that you've had a chance to see him as well, Jesse, is the fact that he was always prepared. He was a student of the game, and more than anything, he was a fiery, fierce competitor. There was a game it was a game before Borucki pitched about a week ago when their tension started to rise. There was a 5-0 game. Canadians were down. They had just got boat raced the night before, and some guy decided to drop down a bunt late. And I think that drew the ire of a couple of guys in the Canadians' dugout. That's neither here nor there. But one of the guys that was right there quietly saying, you know what, I'm going to get him tomorrow, was Ryan Borucki. And when Borucki pitched against Salem the very next night, he was fantastic, struck out 3 over his 2 innings, and again, came off the field on a limited pitch count. We didn't get much more than a couple of innings out of him, but it was that bulldog mentality. And then he pitched just the other night against Everett, and again, it was right back to it. And that's the kind of grit and sandpaper that I think this Blue Jays organization needs. I mean, not to editorialize too much again, Jesse, but this organization, from my perspective, of the 30 teams in Major League Baseball, is one of the softest. It doesn't have that identity. It doesn't have that swagger that you need. And maybe that's because they haven't been to the World Series or the playoffs since 1993, and there's some question marks there. But guys like Ryan Borucki are going to bridge that gap between 93 and what lies ahead, because he's a sandpaper guy. He's a grit guy. He wants the ball. And even on days where he's not pitching, he wants that ball too. He wants to be in the game, and that's the kind of talent that you need. So again, you can talk prospects of a guy that's 96 to 98, but you can also talk about a guy that's 90 to 92, but has that bulldog mentality. And I can tell you who I'll take every day of the week.
This is Rob Fai, voice of the Vancouver Canadians. Rob, our question of the week on Around the Nest. The AA All-Star game ended in a tie, and so the players held a home run derby, went 21 rounds to determine which team would be the victor. What was your reaction when you heard?
Well, as a broadcaster, I'd be all for it. If I'm a farm director, I'm pissed off. Excuse my mouth, but I mean, that's kind of what it is. I mean, the reality is you've got these guys, and right now, all-star games are the bane of a scouting director's existence and a farm director's existence. And if anybody that's got a guy out there who you don't want to get injured or you don't want to have tired when you're coming back onto the roster after the break. So to me, as a fan, I love it. I think it's fantastic. I can't get enough of it. But if I'm a guy within the organization that's trying to keep my guys healthy and rested and ready for the second half, I'd never do that again.
Rob, I love it. Vancouver Canadians, what do we have to look forward to the upcoming homestand?
Well, buddy, I'm assuming we're about to go on an 11-game winning streak based on our 9-game losing streak. You never know, man. Stranger things have happened. But, Jesse, to be honest with you, we get back to Vancouver on Saturday night. It's already sold out. Sunday is sold out. Tuesday is sold out. So the beauty of baseball in Vancouver right now is it's really in its heyday. And I just hope that these Canadians players really absorb it and soak it up. I mean, yeah, there's a few more logistical challenges when it comes to having to cross the border a handful of times. But you know what? When they get to the bright lights of the major leagues, they're going to have to do that anyway. So why not get used to it now? So for my money right now, it is just we're getting ready to turn the corner. The worst, I'm assuming, is behind us, and I'm looking forward to seeing these Canadians start to rack up a few wins.
Find him on Twitter at Rob Fai Nation, the voice of the Vancouver Canadians. Rob, thank you very much for your time.
Awesome, Jesse. See you next week.
From short season A-ball, we move up the ladder, go up to AAA, and bring in Ben Wagner, the voice of the Buffalo Bisons. Ben, how are you?
Doing great. How are you?
Doing very well. How was your All-Star break?
Wonderful. I love the fact that it coincides with the Major League All-Star break, because usually there are always going to be moves to deal with, but things were relatively quiet for the 72 hours, and Buffalo is on both sides of the break playing at home, which is a rarity in our league. But we had the benefit of 3 games before the break, an 8-game homestand out of the break, and just a fantastic opportunity to really kick back and relax and get a full 3 days without too much travel.
And the other great thing about it is the All-Star break does not come halfway through the season. You do the majority of the season before the All-Star game occurs. So now you get yourself a nice little bit of a sprint to the finish.
And that's what I use to tell people, too. I mean, it is a wind sprint to the finish in the minor league season. When you have your All-Star break well past the midway point of the season, and Buffalo only has 53, actually after last night, 52 games left on the schedule. So, I mean, it's a sprint, absolutely a sprint to get to Labor Day. But it is also the most fun time of year with the number of prospects that get promoted and challenged maybe at the course of the next level. And from our standpoint, it's guys coming up from AAA that were performing well in AA, or the trading deadline that's right around the corner as well. So it is definitely the busiest time of year, and usually you like to see the best kind of baseball being played, and usually have a couple of very hungry additions into the clubhouse by the time it's all said and done.
Well, most recently, one of your additions, Aaron Sanchez, on his way back up to the major leagues. I listened to your interview with him, asking him how he felt, how things were going, what he wanted to get out of his start. What did you see out of his start?
Well, we saw a free and easy Aaron Sanchez on the mound, but he at times struggled with fastball command. He missed too high in the zone early on, and when he had to throw it over the plate, it got whacked pretty good. That's why the lengthy first inning. Limited pitch count as well, so at 65 pitches, and I just read the comments from John Givens talking to a number of reporters today, indicating kind of what I thought. You don't want to bring a guy back to the big leagues that's only at 65 pitches from his last time in the minor league rotation on rehab, and then flirting with about 80 pitches the next time out. He throws 80 pitches with Buffalo. He's good for a century mark his next turn in the rotation, whether it's in Buffalo or with the Toronto Blue Jays. But the best news on the heels of that conversation as well, echoed today, while there's a little residual soreness from being down for a month and a half, the body feels good. The lat muscle feels good. He's free and easy. He's throwing the fastball at high velocity, coming through the zone. He's not having to adjust release points whatsoever. And you're seeing the curveball that's pretty firm and the changeup. And he was happy with the action on all three of his pitches, and most importantly, the health of the back and the way that he's feeling today in preparation from 4 days from now when he makes that start on Tuesday.
Sanchez Young was with the Buffalo Bisons, now working his way back up to the major leagues, right back with you. Returning to you from the All-Star break, Matt Hague. When I think of Matt Hague's MVP or Matt Hague's name, I was now add on the VP to the start of his first name. Matt Hague has been a standout throughout the season. He heads off to Omaha, collects another run-scoring base hit there. How was it to talk with him? What did he take away from his All-Star break experience, an All-Star game experience?
Well, this was his third All-Star experience, and he said participating as a member of the Buffalo Bisons was an experience unlike any other versus the other two, Salt Lake City and in Durham. Both fantastic places to play. Omaha still got a very relatively new stadium, but the way that the Bisons treated him and Gregory Infante in terms of traveling on the private plane to and from Omaha, Nebraska, with Matt's fiance and Gregory's wife and our vice president and general manager, Mike Buchkowski, hopping in the private jet, leaving Buffalo, and then shortly after the game concludes, not having to worry about a 4 a.m. wake-up call and then kind of drudging through the Omaha airport, trying to connect through maybe Dallas or somewhere else, Chicago perhaps, trying to leg back to Buffalo on a night where the Bisons were going to be in action. They were home within 3 hours after the game concluded. So he said that experience in its own right was unlike any other that he's ever experienced. And he'll sign up for that again if it involves a AAA All-Star game. So he was really appreciative of that whole experience. He said the steak that he ate in Omaha, Nebraska lived up to the billing as well. So he came back with a full belly, a couple of surprises, and a really good performance representing the Bisons and the organization on Wednesday night.
Every single one of those aspects sounds good, especially that great food. A question from Bluebird Banter. Regarding Dalton Pompey, and this is something I hadn't heard, so maybe you can help me out with this. Dalton Pompey, according to this writer, we know he struggled early this season, but then found his groove in New Hampshire. What are you looking forward to seeing early in his return to Buffalo? Is Pompey returning to Buffalo?
Pompey is returning to Buffalo. He's starting in center field tonight for the Buffalo Bisons.
So what are you looking forward to seeing early in his return? And I guess a little bit later too, but we'll get to that later.
I think you want to see a Dalton Pompey that's more confident in his own ability from what we had seen originally when he was optioned back from the Blue Jays. He struggled at the plate. He was overmatched a couple of times. In the ebbs and the flows. He had some successful games, but it wasn't consistent. So I want to see an aggressive approach at the plate with Dalton Pompey, where he's not looking and passing on too many good pitches to hit. And I want him to continue to ride that wave that he had working in New Hampshire. So I guess the easiest way is to say that and sum it up is not change what he's been doing, because clearly he's been at the plate getting results. And if he can continue to get the results that he was having with the Fisher Cats here at AAA, and I heard the interview with him this morning as well in Sportsnet 590 The Fan, where he didn't feel like he has much of a difference in terms of the way that he's going to be pitched between AA and AAA. So I think the mindset and his attack when he's just talking about himself and his approach at the plate, he's got himself right, and hopefully he continues where we saw him last year in the high mid-300s as well when he was coming up through the system before he went to the big leagues last September. That's what I'm looking most forward to seeing is a return of a player that's confident and feeling like he needs to be on the field every day and has that drive returning.
Around the Nest question of the week. What was your reaction to the home run derby that ended the Eastern League AA All-Star Game?
I thought it should be implemented to every minor league game that goes into extra innings. Wouldn't that be more fun than to
That would be fantastic.
Wouldn't that be? I honestly, it would be much better than getting to the 13th or 14th inning and knowing that nobody is going to tax a bullpen or use a starting pitcher for the next day, because this isn't the major leagues, and you just can't go. You can't go to AA and say, "Give me tomorrow's starter," like the major league teams can. Why not have a pitching coach or a hitting coach or a manager go out on the mound, put up the L screen, and let the game be decided in a winner-take-all home run derby style if it goes past the 10th inning. I loved it. I thought, from a fan perspective, if you get to that tie ball game and you get into the 10th, everybody goes home happy and it engages the fan base.
Ben Wagner with the Buffalo Bisons. It's Back to the Future night tonight at Coca-Cola Field. Any plans?
Yes. The pregame show, which we call Bison's Baseball Today, which is a small little video segment where we kind of recap the night before or / preview the pitching matchup or highlight, for example, Gregory Infante or Matt Haig's outing at the All-Star break. The open and close of today's segment is shot in Doc's DeLorean. I sat literally in one of 6,000 existing DeLoreans that are replications of the DeLorean that was used in the movie Back to the Future, in the original movie, 1985. That original movie, and I did the open and the close for our stand-ups in the DeLorean.
I think that's fantastic.
It's on Twitter. The picture's on Twitter right now. It was awesome.
I'll look it up as soon as I can. Ben, thank you very much. Find Ben Wagner at BenWag 24/7, because the man works hard 24/7.
Yeah, by sitting in movie props, which now includes the Batmobile and the DeLorean.
Hey, that's work. Clock in, sit in the DeLorean, broadcast a game, clock out.
That's it, baby.
From Ben Wagner and AAA, and Ben, thank you again. Off we go to AA, and Bob Lipman, voice of the New Hampshire Fisher Cats, and also one of the voices of the Eastern League All-Star Game. Bob, how are you?
I'm great, and what if I told you that I was doing Around the Nest from our DeLorean tonight on Back to the Future night at Northeast Delta Dental Stadium? Would you believe me?
One of 6,000 remaining.
One in Buffalo and one in New Hampshire tonight. We're traveling back 30 years tonight as well. Hi, Jesse.
Hey, as far as I know, you guys are using the same DeLorean, and somebody just used a time machine to make sure that it reached you in time.
Don't tell anybody, please.
I won't. Let's go right back to the Eastern League All-Star Game. Let's go back in time, not all that very long. At what point did you have an inkling? You know what? They've got a different way to decide the winner of this game.
Well, here's what happened. And again, this was Wednesday night, and we were at Hadlock Field in Portland, Maine. The AAA game was in Omaha. Our game was in Portland. West scores 3 times in the 7th inning, and we went to commercial break after the game had been tied up by the West squad, and I was working with Mark Perlman-Price from the Portland Sea Dogs on the radio, and he handed me an email that had come out from Tuesday morning from the Eastern League office that said that the game was not going to go beyond 9 innings, and here is what everybody had agreed to. So we read up on it in our 2 minutes there between the breaks, so at least we had some idea of what was going to happen. The fans didn't know until the public address announcer took to the mic after 9, and they started wheeling the L out and got ready for what was our home run shootout to decide the All-Star game.
And it really felt like a shootout. I was talking things over with David Fine. David and I broadcast these games together for the Lansing Lugnuts. He's got his great hockey background, and that's the immediate first thing that came to his mind. You choose your 3 sluggers, I choose mine, and off we go into sudden death afterward.
Yeah, and I wonder how much was actually thought about it before the game, and whether you had selected your players, or did you kind of base it on what had happened during the game. Billy McMillan from Portland, the manager, is in here to New Hampshire right now. I have not asked him that question, but I know our Casey Hobson was quick to jump in when he was asked if he'd be one of the 3 participants from the East.
With the Lansing Lugnuts, there were players invited to be part of the Midwest League Home Run Derby, and player after player deferred. And then suddenly Ryan McBroom said, "Oh, I'm in," and so did pitcher Shane Dawson, but he didn't get the shot. I can imagine. What a heck of an opportunity.
Yeah, no question about that. I think they just listened to the rules that the umpires and the staffs went through, and we went out and we decided it. It took, and I noted it in the story, it took 22 swings before somebody actually knocked one out. It was about 12 minutes of clock time, so it wasn't all that long. And, some people had referred to, maybe it was a little bit boring. Not the case at all. I think the crowd was right into the whole atmosphere of this home run shootout, and somebody was on top of it. It was a great way to decide it, and then they had their gigantic fireworks show, and everybody was back on the road by about 10:15 at night.
There was a player, correct me if I'm wrong, who everybody thought it might have been a home run, but he hit it just foul.
There was one that was hit that was just foul, and there was, I forget, Brock Stassi of Reading, I know, hit one that missed by maybe a foot or a foot and a half up the wall. Didn't clear the fence. Might have been Ricky Orpace of the West, hit one right down the line, and they started celebrating. The Western Division squad, and we had umpire Ryan Clark down in the corner there, and he gave the foul sign, and everyone from the East went nuts.
So I would say, by and large, most memorable All-Star game that you've attended?
Oh, yeah. No, and I've been to 6 of these Eastern League All-Star games, so I've seen a lot of fun stuff. Travis Snyder won a home run derby for us here at home. That was a lot of fun. And short of the East squad winning it on a walk-off home run in the bottom of the 9th, this was a pretty good way to decide the game. And I was asked a little bit about ways that you might tinker with it, and maybe the first guy gets 3 swings and then the next guy gets 3 swings, instead of just doing one swing and then going on to the next guy and having to switch the pitchers up each time.
I guess it wasn't a walk-off home run, but it definitely was a drive-off home run. Everybody's cleared the field. There it is. There's the winner. Celebrate and head on back home.
And there was no doubt about it, too. It was one of those majestic shots into the night, and it would just be how far would it be up into that right field bleacher seating section at Hadlock Field. And Brian Pointer of Reading was the guy who hit the home run. He actually had a 3-home-run game earlier this year at Hadlock. And so he's certainly a guy who felt comfortable in that ballpark.
How was the broadcast divided up among the broadcasters? Because you weren't alone in calling the game. And how did you guys divide up the home run derby?
I worked with Mark Perlman-Price from the Sea Dogs. Mike Antonellis, the everyday voice of the Portland Sea Dogs, sat in on the Nesson telecast of the game, so it was beamed all over New England. So it was just Mark and I in the radio booth, and I think we each called the first 3, and then we started alternating when we got past the initial swings in the home run derby.
There is a moment of excitement coming up with Buffalo. The Bisons have now received Dalton Pompey back after he scorched Double-A. You lose Dalton Pompey, and now we are looking forward to Jeff Hoffman's arrival in Double-A, what I've seen termed, and this doesn't sound as good spoken as it does when you look at it, what Hoffmanchester, in terms of joining the Fisher Cats at home. What else are you looking forward to this second half?
Well, Roman Fields, I think, he's going to replace Dalton Pompey in the lineup tonight in center field, and has certainly that ability to electrify your offense. Spent a week on the disabled list when scoring a winning run on our last homestand, slid into home plate, and ended up jamming his thumb a little bit in a game that the Fisher Cats would beat the Rock Cats 1-0. That was actually our 4th of July game. But Fields is back in the lineup tonight, so our fans certainly will look forward to that. But there's no question, Jesse, that the Fisher Cats have made a significant move up the standings in the last month or so, because Dalton Pompey was just a regular contributor night in and night out, and put up some offensive numbers like we've never seen by a Fisher Cat player over a period of a month. That he was as hot as can be, and will leave here having reached base successfully 42 consecutive games going back to last July wearing a Fisher Cat uniform.
Hey, Trenton Thunder, Reading, Bud and Phil, you guys are coming. 46-42, the Fisher Cats, 3.5 games behind the first place Thunder.
Yeah, and again, this is a season best, 4 games over 500 right now for the Fisher Cats. They were kind of languishing a little bit after a long road trip in mid-June, and here we are a month later, and clearly plenty to play for. And just like the International League, you heard Ben say 52 games left in their season. We have, I think, 53 games left in our season, so there's not a whole lot of time to make up a lot of ground, so you've got to be right in the race, and the Fisher Cats are right now.
Bob Lipman back at home, back in New Hampshire at Northeast Delta Dental Stadium. Taylor Cole goes to the mound tonight as the Fisher Cats host their rival, the Portland Sea Dogs. Bob, thank you very much.
Thanks, Jesse, and have a great week, everybody. Lots of wins.
From Bob Lipman in Double-A, now down to A Advanced, Dunedin, and the DJ's voice, Marshall Kelner. Marshall, how are you?
I'm good, Jesse. How are you?
Doing very well. Enjoying this with you, with us in Class Single A, just a level beneath you. We got the day off for the All-Star Game, but our All-Star Games have already occurred back in June. It's strange to start referring to this as the second half now. We've been in the second half for a while. How is your second half proceeding?
Well, it was a big series win for the DJs last weekend at home, a wraparound series against a Jupiter team that's really struggling. DJs lost the first game, a 1-run contest. Now 6 of their 12 losses in the second half have been by 1 run, so they're close. Now 9-12 in the second half because they took the final 3 games against Jupiter. So far we're in Port St. Lucie here at beautiful Tradition Field, the spring training home of the Mets, and the 2 teams have split the first 2 games. A really positive win for the DJs last night. They had dropped their last 6 of 7 on the road, and last night Sean Reed Foley struggled with his command for a second straight start, but was outscored upon in 3 2/3 innings. And then the bullpen really took over. Alberto Tirado came on. He struggled throwing strikes, so they went to Brady Dragmeyer, who has been simply sensational in the second half. He had to go back to extended spring training, Jesse, at the end of May for just about a couple weeks, and he had an ERA over 10 at the time. His sinker was not sinking. The velocity was there, but he wasn't throwing a slider a lot. The sinker wasn't sinking. Now the sinker is sinking 94, 95 miles an hour. With the slider in the upper 80s, he's picking up strikeouts. His mound presence looks entirely different. He's a very confident guy out there right now, and he picked up his first win of the season last night with 2 2/3 scoreless innings. And Richard Arena finally broke out. He was mired in a 1-for-19 slump. Tried 4 for 4 last night with an RBI triple. And you got to mention Anthony Alford because he extended his hitting streak to 18 games. And I actually did some research earlier today, Jesse. Looked at his numbers with Lansing and with us. And he has failed to reach base in only 4 games this year. Unbelievable.
it's pretty remarkable how you can just expect Anthony to get on, and especially when those guys start hitting behind him. And let me ask you more specifically about Urania. Where was he hitting the ball? Because with Lansing, when he turned it on from the left side, he would start driving it down into the left center field power alley. And from the right side, because that's more of his unnatural side, we were pleased anytime we saw him barrel one up from the right.
Yeah, well, the right side is where he hit the triple last night to the gap in left center field, pulled it. And from the left side, you're right. He has started to go the other way, and that's what he did last night in at least one, if not two, of his 3 singles prior to the triple. So that was good to see. And really with any hitter, when they're going the other way with authority, as Derek Lovelace did last night, for example, with a 3-run bomb over the 16-foot-high wall and left to get us started with a 3-0 lead in the second inning, that hitter is kind of feeling locked in. And I think we had seen Urania struggle to hit some of the off-speed and breaking stuff. The strikeouts were up. He was chasing a lot of balls in the dirt and up high in the zone as well. Last night, hopefully the start of something.
Perhaps for Richard Urania, with that batting average raised back up to 259, joining Anthony Alford, joining, as we've seen, Mitch Ney, multi-hit efforts on, once again, nearly every single game. When I don't see Mitch Ney has at least 2 base hits, I'm surprised.
Yeah, Mitch has been terrific in the second half, and like Urania, when he's hitting the ball the other way, driving it that way, and he has the ability to do so with power, he's a different hitter, and his plate discipline is better. I talked to hitting coach John Tamargo Jr. and asked him what exactly is the difference he sees in Ney in the second half, and he said a couple things. He's a little bit quieter with his swing, and then he just said one word: confidence. And that can go a long way as a hitter. And right now, Mitch Ney's confidence is sky high. The batting average is about 375 in the second half.
We started this off, though, talking about pitching. And it's tempting to talk about all the DJ's talented young hitters. But from Brady Dragmeyer breaking through, Sean Reed-Foley, scoreless innings yesterday. Even though he walked 4, he struck out more. Connor Green, 5 innings, heck, only allowing 2 runs. And then I just keep on going back to Luis Santos, because Luis Santos has turned in gem after gem for you this season.
He has. And, really, you take out 2 or 3 bad outings that he had in April and maybe 1 or 2 in May. And Luis Santos has probably, if you put all the good outings and list them of the entire DJ's pitching staff, Santos has to have probably a third, if not more, of those good outings. When he's on, is dominant. It's not just 7 innings of shutout ball. It's normally 7 innings with, maybe 3 hits allowed and 6 to 8 strikeouts as well. Fastball, curveball, both plus pitches, I would say, for him, and then an emerging changeup as well. And when he is locked in, it is fun to watch because he works quickly, a broadcaster's dream, and how many base runners they reach.
A question for Marshall Kelner with the Dunedin Blue Jays, coming from Bluebird Banter, about Hyra Laborte. How was his experience at the Futures game?
I think it was nothing but positive. I mean, he looked 11 pitches, and he strikes out 2 batters, and he got Kyle Schwarber to ground out as well. The stud in the Chicago Cubs organization who's already produced at big league level this year. So for a guy that at times has struggled to throw strikes with us, for him to go out there on the big stage when I'm sure he had to be nervous, that was pretty awesome to see. And we'll see if it can carry forward. He is expected to go tomorrow in Jeff Hoffman's slot in the rotation. And he's going to be very, very key to this second half if the DJs hope to get back into the race. Down by 6 games now with 49 to go, including tonight, which is hard to believe. He's going to be key, and so are the other 2 young pitchers you mentioned, Green and Reed-Foley. Green, 20 years old, Reed-Foley, 19, and Laborte, 21. Those 3 guys, in addition to Santos and Murphy Smith, just rejoined us and see how he does, but he was fantastic earlier in the year for the DJs. But those 3 young guys, I think the Jays are going to go as far as those 3 take them.
And finally, our Around the Nest question of the week. Marshall, what was your reaction when you discovered that the Eastern League All-Star Game had been decided by a home run derby?
I think it's it's classic for minor league baseball. I think there'd be a lot of hooting and hollering if they did something like that in the big leagues. But there was a lot of hooting and hollering when they ended it in a tie, and that's why the rosters are so big at the big league level, because if it does go extra innings, they normally have enough pitchers that they can get through it. But I think it's just classic. Like you couldn't even imagine something like that until it actually happens, and how exciting. And that's really what it's about. It's not determining home field advantage. It's for the players, really, and the fans to experience the show. And it's all about the entertainment value, and I think that entertainment value had to be very high, and it had to be especially fun for the players. And those guys are the ones that busted all year long and put in the time to earn that all-star appearance, and they had to be having a lot of fun out there on the field.
The Dunedin Blue Jays are in St. Lucie tonight, first pitch 6:30 p.m. They'll be back at Florida Auto Exchange Stadium this coming Sunday to host Daytona. You can find Marshall Kelner on Twitter, @MarshallKelner. Marshall, thank you very much.
Thanks, Jesse. Have a great weekend, everyone.
For Marshall Kelner and the A Advanced Florida State League with the DJs, now down to Class Single A and the Lansing Lugnuts, I bring in David Fine. David, what was your baseball highlight this past week?
Seeing a batter go 6 for 6 and reach all 7 times he went up to the plate, Ryan McBroom, was pretty interesting. And you saw it with me, Jesse.
And then he went 3 for 3 his next day before a sacrifice fly, according to Rules Quirk, ended the streak at 9 consecutive base hits. For those who weren't there, at what point did you get the feeling, hey, Ryan McBroom is suddenly on target?
I don't think it happened for me until extra innings, and the Lugnuts ended up losing that game in 13 innings. But for me, when McBroom came up in the bottom of the 13th, and at this point he's already 5 for 5, and he's walked, and there's 2 runners in scoring position, and he lasers a single. Then at that point, and that was unfortunately was his last at bat, but at that point you knew he had himself just, as he put it, the best day of his career, best hitting day.
Which perhaps topped the game earlier in the season when he went 5 for 5 again at Dayton.
Lansing Lugnuts. The thing with that game was he had 5 singles. This game he had 2 doubles and a home run stretched along with 3 singles.
And now McBroom is batting .349. He has distanced himself from all of his other contenders atop the Midwest League batting title. What makes him such a special hitter?
I think it's the way he's learned to drive the ball this year, and it seems like he's gone from primarily a single, sometimes double hitter, and over the course of this hot streak, he's a threat to get an extra base hit every night, whether it's a double or a home run. He's hitting things, Jesse, either pulling them down the line, the left field line as a righty batter, or sending them to the track, it seems, whenever, twice or 3 times a game. So he's putting himself in position for an extra base hit twice a game. This is just over the course of the last week since we last chatted on this hot stretch.
With other players in the starting lineup for the Lansing Lugnuts, the folks have been curious about Dowell Lugo, a top prospect, number 15 in the organization according to Baseball America, DJ Davis, the 2012 first-round draft pick. How have each of them been looking?
DJ Davis responded to one of the worst games of his career where he had 4 strikeouts, which was a career high. And the next day he goes out, and you don't know necessarily how is this player going to respond. You just go 0 for 5 with 4 strikeouts. And then Davis had 2 bunt singles, and he had a bunt single his first at bat. It was a sacrifice situation, but it moved runners along. And then he had a bunt single where he made the pitcher on the South Bend Cubs fall on his tuchus, and that was a reliever, and it was in the 8th inning. And Davis had to laugh about that one. I was talking to him after, and he said, "Yep, I messed him up. I messed him up," was what he said. So Davis, he's so fast that he's always going to keep himself in some sort of a prospect conversation. And he's batting .280, and he has 4 home runs, and he nearly has 50 RBIs in 90 games, which doesn't sound like a lot, but for the Lugnuts, he's been batting third to fifth in the top scoring offenses order in the entire league, so that's certainly a positive. Donwell Lugo's been walking a lot more, Jesse. He's averaging with the Lugnuts. Yes, it's only been 13 games, but he's been walking every 3 or 4 games on average, as opposed to over the course of his career, he's walked an average every week's worth of games that he plays, which is a positive, and he's a powerful hitter.
Speaking with David Fine, one of the voices of the Lansing Lugnuts, these guys are all considered prospects. They're all guys scouts have known to keep their eye on even before they show up at the ballpark. 2 players who are not on those prospect lists, but have certainly turned it on the second half, Chris Carlson and Michael De La Cruz. And let's begin with De La Cruz. The opportunity is now there for him. Lansing Lugnuts starting catcher earlier in the year, Danny Jansen's been on the DL ever since early June. Mike Reeves just promoted up to Dunedin. And so how is De La Cruz taking advantage of this opportunity?
By raising his average over the last week and a half's worth of games that he's played, 12 games, but he was the backup, so essentially over the last 20 or 30 days, he's raised his average from 118 to 193. And I know any fan hears that and says, well, his average is still below 200. What does this really mean? There's a marked difference in his swing and how he's hitting the ball. And at the minor leagues, Jesse, it's not like Major League Baseball where a team could hold it against you in contract negotiations if you hit below 200, and then they could say, well, you didn't perform all year, so we're not going to pay you. De La Cruz, if he continues to hit like this, he's due for a promotion, probably not this year, but perhaps he's on the Dunedin Blue Jays next year in whatever role. And then you asked about Chris Carlson.
Yeah, let's talk about Carlson.
He's 4th in the league in on-base percentage, and his average was at 270 for most of the first half of the season through the first 70 games, and we're at game 90 at this point, and his average is 308, and he has an on-base percentage above 400, and it goes along with the theme for the Lugnuts leadoff hitters this year. There's been 3 different ones, Tim LeCastro, Anthony Alford, and Chris Carlson, and 3 of those guys are all in the top 5 of the league in on-base percentage over the course of this season.
Question sent in just now from Twitter from Clint, wondering when is Danny Jansen due back?
So he's been rehabbing, and I hope he's back within the next 2 to 3 weeks for the Lugnuts. He could certainly use a little bit more depth at catcher. We don't really know, Jesse. He's still on the disabled list.
Now turning our attention to team's pitchers and the Lansing Lugnuts bullpen. Now there have been some pretty darn good arms there throughout the season. Lugnuts have not blown too many saves, but the emerging relief forces, recently especially Dusty Isaacs and Colton Turner. Let's take them each by turn. What has turned around Colton Turner's season?
It's something we've talked about on the air a few times, Jesse, and that's how he throws the ball, which is pretty important for a pitcher. So Colton Turner, coming back from Tommy John surgery, was throwing with an over-the-head motion, and he had an ERA above 5 when he essentially was doing that. So over the last month or so, he's worked into a 3/4 motion pitching, where his arm angle when he throws it is a little bit lower down. It's more in line with your shoulder level when you bring it forward. So Turner's ERA now is below 4, and he's only allowed 1 run in his last 14 innings pitched. That's an ERA below 1. And Dusty Isaacs has only given up 1 run over his last 12 1/3 innings pitched. And before you ask, Jesse, what's turned his season around is he's been working on a slider that he's picked up from other Lugnuts pitchers, his pitching mate.
Yeah, Jesus Tinoco being that pitching mate in question. Tinoco and Dusty Isaacs working very hard together. Tinoco, another one of those top prospects that folks have been wondering about. And, well, it seems like Tinoco, he's getting deeper into games. However, there has not been one of those lights-out performances that we saw from him at Cedar Rapids.
Right, in that game he struck out 10, which tied a season high for Lugnuts pitching. And, I mean, you look at his record and you say, well, he's 1-5, and what is that? The wins-loss record shades how he's doing. You could say, well, this would be a scout thing, an old baseball scout thing to say, Jesse. And you know how I don't like that. Well, he's 1-5, so he doesn't know how to win a game. Well, that discounts that he's received the worst run support of any Lugnuts starter this year. So Lansing offense scores more than 5 runs a game, 5.1. And Tinoco receives 4 runs of support. And a lot of those runs have been late runs. Tinoco's been pitching just fine. It's just that he's either been no decision because of late run support, or he's earned a loss because the offense hasn't done too well for him.
And finally, with David Fine with the Lansing Lugnuts, our Around the Nest question of the week. David, what was your reaction upon hearing that the AA Eastern League All-Star Game had been decided by a home run derby?
I love that it was the players' idea. I loved everything about the idea, not because it's something that baseball could put in to get rid of extra innings. That's never going to happen. But there's something pure about players in the dugout talking about it, and instead of the strict school teacher shutting it down and saying, no, we have to do it this way, that the teams could come to an agreement on proceeding that way. There's something old-timey about that. I don't mind that at all. And it also reminded me a little bit of hockey with a hockey shootout, which I never mind either. Actually, I do mind shootouts in the NHL, but anyway.
I like that they called it a home run shootout. They basically said, hey, this is what we're going for. We want to evoke the hockey shootout, and the game is taking place in Portland, Maine, so there might be a lot of hockey fans there who immediately understand, okay, I know exactly what's happening here.
Well, even soccer is getting bigger, Jesse. Don't discount that. We have a soccer shootout.
I suppose so. But when I hear about 3 sluggers chosen by each team, and then after that, each one is a sudden death round, with soccer, I would have considered maybe 5 sluggers for each team. Well, that'll do it for Around the Nest this week. David Fine, thank you very much.
Take care.
David and the Lansing Lugnuts play tonight at home against the South Bend Cubs. 7:05 p.m. game. You can hear all the action via the TuneIn Radio app. My thanks to David Fine with the Lansing Lugnuts, as well to Marshall Kelner with the Dunedin Blue Jays, Rob Fai with Vancouver Canadians, Ben Wagner with the Buffalo Bisons, and Bob Lipman with the New Hampshire Fisher Cats. I'm Jesse Goldberg-Strassler. This has been Around the Nest. You can find us on iTunes, also via SoundCloud, and aroundthenest.mlblogs.com. Till next week, we'll enjoy the baseball.